Welcome to Two Beans in a Pod. Today, we are tackling something that, well, a lot of people see almost every day. Those persistent white lines you see in the sky behind airplanes.
Right. They just stretch across the whole sky sometimes.
Exactly. And it's not just a curiosity. It really gets to a fundamental question of what is happening up there. Are these trails just, harmless condensation from an engine hitting cold air? Or are they something more deliberate? Are they intentional chemical trails, what people often call chemtrails, part of some kind of hidden government program? My position is that these trails are in fact evidence of undisclosed climate modification, specifically something called solar radiation management, or SRM.
And I can see why people get there. I really can. The visual is powerful. But my position is grounded firmly in, the established atmospheric physics. The trails we see are scientifically known as condensation trails, or contrails. They're basically ice clouds. And every relevant scientific and federal agency agrees that the claims of a secret chemical spraying program just don't hold up to the evidence we have.
Well, I appreciate that commitment to the established science, but just calling it a conspiracy theory kind of overlooks some crucial details. It's not just what we see in the sky, but also the documented history of government interest in modifying the weather. The argument here is that these lines aren't just water vapor. They are the delivery mechanism for solar radiation management, an intentional program to dim the sun using aerosols and manufactured nanoparticles. And the thing is, this isn't some future idea. Climate engineering, or what some even call weather warfare, has arguably been going on in different forms for more than 70 years. And the official denials, that's exactly what you'd expect for a program of this size and secrecy.
Okay, but I just have a hard time with this idea of criminal denial when there's such a staggering amount of transparent, public, scientific study on this exact phenomenon. Let me explain. First, the way these trails linger and spread out, what scientists call persistent spreading contrail cirrus, that's not a mystery. It's a well-documented process. And in fact, we know that they have a significant net warming impact on the climate.
A warming impact?
Yes, a warming impact. It's actually comparable in scale to all of aviation's carbon dioxide emissions combined. It's a huge deal. And because it's such a serious, scientifically verified threat, you have agencies like the FAA, NASA, and NOAA jointly publishing a public contrails research roadmap. Their stated goal is to understand and mitigate the climate impact of these specific contrails by 2050. This is public research into the actual warming threat from these ice clouds.
The distinction, though, has to be the composition. What is actually being released? My side points to extensive independent lab testing of rain, snow, and air samples. These tests consistently show the presence of specific elements, manufactured nanoparticles of aluminum, barium, and even graphene. These are the very elements named in climate engineering patents, but they are not what you'd expect from normal jet fuel. So, if these are just normal contrails, why do we find these specific nanoparticles? And beyond that, you have to look at the planes themselves. Modern high-bypass turbofan engines are incredibly efficient. They run cooler. Many advocates argue they're almost incapable of making these long, persistent trails under normal flight conditions, which suggests something is being added to the fuel or the exhaust to create them.
That is a compelling point about the engine efficiency. But it's not just about the engine. It's really about the atmospheric conditions where the plane is flying. The key factor is something called the Schmidt-Appelman criterion. It's the specific mix of temperature, pressure, and humidity that allows for a contrail to form and persist. And while these new engines are more efficient, they still pump out enormous amounts of hot, humid air. If you're at 35,000 feet and the air is already cold and nearly saturated with moisture, that little bit of extra water vapor from the engine is all it takes to tip it over the edge and form ice crystals. That's just physics. And as for the composition argument, the challenge there is really methodological. When you test for something like aluminum, you have to ask, what's the baseline? Aluminum is the third most common element in the Earth's crust. It's everywhere as dust. So when these independent tests find it, it's almost impossible to know if they're finding manufactured nanoparticles or just, regular atmospheric dust that got into the sample. Without very rigorous controls, it's highly likely you're just misinterpreting the natural background.
That seems like a convenient way to dismiss the work of a lot of researchers who are finding not just aluminum, but things like graphene, things that are not naturally floating around in high concentrations. And the goal of using materials like aluminum oxide isn't just about making a cloud, it's about changing the reflectivity, the albedo, of the atmosphere. That is the literal definition of solar radiation management. The presence of these specific materials just can't be explained away by engine soot or dust, especially when you pair it with the visual evidence. If these were all just short-lived trails that vanished in a minute, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It's the lasting sky-altering effect that's the issue.
And that brings us right back to this question of covert action versus public science. Okay, so if, as you say, a massive SRM program has been raging for 70 years, why would the FAA, NASA, and NOAA be so focused on a public plan to reduce the warming effects of contrails by 2050? Their whole roadmap is about figuring out how to reroute planes to avoid creating these persistent clouds. If a secret military program was already creating them on purpose, why would they fund this huge public long-term plan to do the exact opposite? It just doesn't line up. Dr. Douglas McMartin, who is a leading expert on climate intervention, has stated very clearly that right now, no one is doing geoengineering.
I'm just not convinced that a public research document proves anything. I mean, to many, that discrepancy is proof of the deception. The argument is that agencies like NASA are basically being used as a PR tool for the military-industrial complex. They provide plausible deniability. We have documented proof of the military's interest in this stuff going back decades. Just look at the 1996 paper, Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. It's all laid out there, and it's not just theory anymore. Look at what's happening at the state level. Wyoming recently introduced a bill to ban geoengineering. When people testify for these bills, they're not talking about a future threat. They're talking about something they believe is happening right now that needs to be stopped.
But legislative action is a reflection of public concern, not necessarily a confirmation of physical reality. I mean, if a legislature passes a bill banning dragons, it doesn't prove that dragons exist. It just proves that people are worried about them.
And just a quick break, if you're finding this debate as fascinating as we are, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. But this threat isn't dragons. The concern here is tangible. It's about a belief that governments are weaponizing our environment and public health, and that belief comes from an absolute collapse of trust in these agencies. When high-profile people start talking about chemtrails, it lands because people are already primed to believe that data is being manipulated, that they're not being told the truth. For instance, advocates will point to how UV radiation is measured. Instruments often cut off before they get to the UVC spectrum. And if an SRM program were damaging the ozone layer, well, UVC is exactly what you'd want to measure to see the full damage. By not reporting it, they can hide the true impact.
I absolutely get the distrust. I do. It is deep, is societal, and in many cases, it's justified. But that distrust cannot replace physics. Scientific evidence has to be the foundation here. And on the UVC point, it's a bit tenuous. I mean, if geoengineering was successfully dimming the sun, you'd see a drop in all incoming radiation, including UVA and UVB, which are measured constantly. The main warming effect from these contrails isn't from ozone depletion anyway. It's from the clouds themselves trapping heat. The public research by NASA and these other agencies is being done out in the open precisely to try and build back some of that trust. It provides a detailed, evidence-based explanation for what we're seeing in the sky, one that doesn't require a massive 70-year global conspiracy.
The fact remains that people who are watching the skies, people who are doing this independent testing, they insist they are seeing a coordinated atmospheric assault. They believe it's confirmed by the presence of these engineered nanoparticles designed to alter the climate. And they argue that this entire global operation is being hidden in plain sight, disguised as natural contrails. From this perspective, the priority is to recognize what's happening and stop it. The clouds we see are just too persistent, too widespread, and their chemical makeup is too specific to be simple water vapor.
And from my perspective, what we're seeing, however compelling it looks, is fundamentally identifiable as persistent spreading contrail cirrus. their formation, their behavior, their climate impact, it's all verifiable through public science. Now, do these contrails pose a real and significant warming threat that demands government action and mitigation? Absolutely, 100%. But the weight of the expert consensus and all this public research, it just doesn't support the claim that this is proof of a covert, toxic geoengineering operation. The focus has to stay on mitigating the scientifically verified harm of actual contrails.
So, it seems we both agree on the severity of the climate crisis. And we agree that aviation's impact on the upper atmosphere is a serious problem that needs to be addressed. We diverge pretty fundamentally on the origin and the nature of what's actually taking place up in our skies. Is it intentional dispersal or is it an unavoidable consequence?
Exactly. And figuring that out is critical because it determines whether we should be focused on uncovering a secret plot or on mitigating the known consequences of our existing technology.
Thank you for listening to Two Beans in a Pod.